It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning, the kind of day that makes you want to relax and have fun. The sky was blue, the birds were chirping, and I could feel the warm sun on my face. For me, that meant it was the perfect time to mow my lawn. I grabbed my trusty lawn mower from the garage, rolled it out to the front yard, and got ready to cut the grass. My name's Jake, by the way. I'm just a regular guy who lives in a small house in a quiet neighborhood. At least, I thought it was quiet. I had no idea that trouble was waiting for me just across the street. See, there's this lady named Karen who lives right in front of my house. Yep, that Karen. You've probably heard of people like her before. She's the boss of our neighborhood group called the Homeowners Association, or HOA for short. She acts like she's the queen of everything around here. If your trash can stays out too long, she'll complain. If your dog barks once, she'll write you a nasty note. Everyone knows her, and everyone tries to stay out of her way. But that day, she was watching me, and she wasn't happy at all. I started up my lawnmower with a loud vroom. The grass was getting tall, and I wanted my yard to look nice. I didn't think it was a big deal, just a guy cutting his grass on a sunny day. But Karen? Oh, she thought it was the worst thing ever. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to pick a fight with the wrong person. And me? I had a little secret she'd never guess. This wasn't just about a lawnmower. It was about to turn into something way bigger. So, before we go any further, I've got a question for you. Where are you watching this from today? Are you at home? Maybe school? Or somewhere else? Tell me in the comments, I really want to know. Oh, and if you like fun stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, this story's going to get wild, and you won't want to leave until it's over. Let me set the scene for you a little more. My house isn't fancy. It's small, with a tiny porch and a patchy lawn that I try to keep neat. I've lived here for a while, and I like it because it's usually peaceful. The neighbors are nice, well, most of them. There's old Mr. Thompson next door who waves every morning. There's a young family down the street with a little kid who rides his bike in circles. And then there's Karen. She's different. She's always looking out her window, waiting for someone to mess up so she can swoop in and tell them off. That morning, I wasn't thinking about Karen at all. I was just happy to be outside. The grass smelled fresh, and the mower hummed as I pushed it back and forth. I even waved at Mr. Thompson when I saw him watering his flowers. Everything felt normal. But across the street, Karen was already planning her attack. She didn't like the noise my mower made. She didn't like that I was out there doing my own thing. To her, I was breaking some kind of invisible rule, and she wasn't going to let it slide. Here's the funny part, I'm not the kind of guy who gets into trouble. I'm pretty quiet. I go to work, I come home, I mow my lawn. That's me. But Karen didn't care about that. She saw me as a problem, someone she could boss around. She had no clue who I really was or what I could do. And that's what makes the story so good. She thought she was the big boss, but she was about to find out she wasn't as smart as she thought. Picture this, me, pushing my mower, minding my own business. The sun's shining, the grass is flying, and I'm just enjoying the day. Then, out of nowhere, I catch a glimpse of Karen's curtains moving. You know how you can sometimes feel someone staring at you? That's what it was like. I looked up, and there she was, peeking out her window with a sour look on her face. I didn't think much of it at first. She's always grumpy about something. But then she disappeared from the window, and I knew something was up. I kept mowing, figuring she'd just huff and puff like usual and leave me alone. But oh no, not this time. Karen had a plan. She was ready to make a big scene, and she thought she'd win. She didn't know I had a trick up my sleeve, something that would turn her whole day upside down. That's the thing about Karen. She's loud and bossy, but she doesn't always see what's right in front of her. And that day, she was about to learn a lesson she'd never forget. So, let's rewind a bit. I'd been living in this neighborhood for a few months. I moved here because it seemed like a nice, calm place to settle down. I didn't want drama. I just wanted a simple life. But Karen? She loves drama. She's the kind of person who thinks she's in charge of everything: your yard, your house, even your Saturday mornings. If she doesn't like something, she'll let you know. and if you don't listen, she'll make it a problem. That's what she tried to do with me. As I mowed, I started thinking about how silly it was. It's just a lawnmower. It's not like I was throwing a loud party or blasting music. I was just cutting my grass. But to Karen, it was like I'd started a war. She couldn't stand it. And me? I was about to show her that I wasn't just some guy she could yell at. There was more to me than she knew, and it was going to change everything. Okay, one more thing before we move on. Imagine you're me for a second. You're outside, doing something totally normal, and someone starts watching you like you're doing something wrong. How would you feel? Annoyed. Confused. That's how I felt. But I didn't let it stop me. I kept going, because I knew I wasn't doing anything bad. Karen, though she was already dialing her phone, ready to tattle on me. She thought she had all the power. She was wrong. So, stick with me here. This is just the beginning. The mower's running, Karen's plotting, and I'm about to get caught up in something bigger than I planned. What do you think happens next? Have you ever had a neighbor like Karen who gets mad over nothing? Drop your stories in the comments, I'd love to hear them. This is going to be a ride, and trust me, you'll want to see how it ends. Let's keep going. I was right in the middle of mowing my lawn when it happened. The sun was shining bright, and I was pushing my mower back and forth, making nice, neat lines in the grass. That's when Karen burst out of her house like a tornado. Her arms were flapping up and down, like a bird trying to take off. "Jake," she shouted, so loud I bet the whole neighborhood heard her. "That mower is way too noisy. It's against HOA rules." I stopped what I was doing. The mower went quiet, and I wiped the sweat off my forehead with the back of my hand. I looked over at her and tried to be nice. "Morning, Karen," I said with a little wave. "It's just a mower. I'll be done soon, I promise." But Karen didn't care about promises. She wasn't in the mood to be nice. "Oh no." She pointed her finger at me like I'd just robbed a candy store. "I'm calling the cops," she yelled. "You'll regret this, Jake." Now, I'm not the kind of guy who likes to fight. I don't yell back or make a big fuss. So, I just shrugged my shoulders, turned the mower back on, and kept going. The vroom vroom sound started up again, and I pushed it across the yard like nothing happened. But Karen? She wasn't done. Not even close. She stood there on her porch, glaring at me with her meanest look. Her eyes were squinted, and her mouth was all tight, like she'd just eaten a sour lemon. Then she yanked her phone out of her pocket and started punching the buttons, calling the police right then and there. Karen thought she was winning. She always thought she was winning. That's how she was. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her as the queen of complaining. If you put up too many Halloween decorations like a few extra pumpkins or a silly ghost, she'd march over and tell you to take them down. If your car was parked just a tiny bit too close to the curb, she'd leave a note on your windshield. One time, she even complained about Mr. Thompson's flowers because she said they were too bright. Can you believe that? Too bright? She was always finding something to fuss about, and she loved being in charge. But this time? This time was different. Karen didn't know it yet, but she was about to step into something way bigger than she could handle. She thought I was just some regular guy with a noisy mower. She thought she could boss me around like she did with everyone else. But I had a secret, a big one, and it was going to turn her whole plan upside down. As I kept mowing, I could see her out of the corner of my eye. She was pacing back and forth on her porch, talking fast into her phone. Her voice was loud and sharp, like she was trying to make sure the cops knew this was a huge deal. "Yes, officer," I heard her say. "He's breaking the rules." It's so loud I can't even think. I almost laughed, but I didn't. I just kept pushing the mower, cutting the grass nice and even. She thought she had the upper hand. That's what she always thought. She figured the cops would show up, tell me to stop, and she'd get to say, "I told you so." The thing is, Karen didn't scare me. I wasn't worried about her yelling or her phone call. I dealt with bigger problems than a grumpy neighbor before. But I didn't say anything. I didn't tell her to calm down or leave me alone. I just let her do her thing. Why? Because I knew something she didn't. Something that was going to make her look pretty silly by the end of this. Let me tell you a little more about Karen. She's the kind of person who thinks she runs the whole neighborhood. She's got short hair that's always perfect, and she wears these big sunglasses even when it's cloudy. Her house is spotless white paint, green bushes, not a single weed in sight. She's proud of that house, and she's proud of being the HOA boss. If you break one of her rules, she acts like it's the end of the world. And that day, she decided my lawnmower was her next big battle. I kept mowing, and the grass smelled so good as it flew out from under the blades. I was almost done with the front yard, and I was starting to feel pretty good. But Karen wasn't giving up. She finished her call and put the phone down, crossing her arms like she was waiting for something big to happen. She kept staring at me, her face all red and mad. I could tell she was thinking, just wait, Jake. You're in trouble now. She was so sure of herself. So sure she was right. But here's the thing, she wasn't right. Not this time. She didn't know who she was messing with. I wasn't just some guy cutting his grass. There was more to me than that, and she was about to find out. I didn't look worried. I didn't act scared. I just kept going, letting her think she was in control. That's what made it so fun. She had no idea what was coming. The neighborhood was quiet except for the mower and Karen's yelling. Mr. Thompson peeked out from his yard, holding his watering can. He gave me a little wave, like he was saying, good luck with her. I waved back and smiled. Even he knew Karen was a handful. Everyone did. But nobody ever stood up to her. They just nodded and did what she said to keep the peace. Not me, though. Not today. Karen tapped her foot on the porch, watching me like a hawk. She was waiting for the cops to roll in and save the day her day. She thought they'd pull up with lights flashing and tell me to turn off my mower. She probably pictured me saying sorry and promising never to do it again. That's what she wanted. That's what she always got. But this wasn't going to end the way she planned. I finished one side of the yard and turned the mower around. The sun was getting hotter, and I could feel the sweat on my neck. Karen was still there, still glaring. She muttered something under her breath, but I couldn't hear it over the mower's noise. I didn't need to hear it. I knew she was mad. I knew she thought she was the boss. And I knew she was wrong. So, there I was, mowing away, with Karen ready to start a war over a little noise. She thought she had me cornered. She thought she was the smart one. But she didn't see the whole picture. She didn't know what I knew. And that's what made this moment so good. The tension was building, like a storm getting ready to break. Something big was about to happen, and Karen was walking right into it without a clue. Stick around, because this is where it starts to get really exciting. I kept pushing my mower back and forth across the yard. The grass was flying everywhere, and I was starting to feel good about how nice it looked. But out of the corner of my eye, I could see Karen. She was pacing on her porch, walking fast from one side to the other. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and she was talking so quick I couldn't catch the words. Every few seconds, she'd stop and throw me a dirty look like I was some bad guy messing up her perfect day. Her eyes were all squinted, and her mouth was twisted up, like she was super mad. I just kept mowing, pretending I didn't notice. Time went by, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. I was almost done with the yard when I saw something weird. A police car rolled up the street. It was moving slow and quiet, not making a sound. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just a regular black and white car with police written on the side. It stopped right in front of my house, and 2 officers climbed out. One was tall with a serious face, and the other was shorter with a little smile. I didn't know what to think. Karen saw them too, and oh boy, her face changed fast. She went from mad to happy in about 2 seconds. Her eyes got big, and she smiled like she'd just won $1 million. See? I told you, she shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. She jumped off her porch and started marching over to the cops, her arms swinging like she was in charge. She thought she'd finally gotten me. She thought the police were here because of her big phone call about my noisy mower. She was so sure of herself, bouncing a little as she walked. But here's where things get good. The cops didn't even look at her. Not once. They didn't turn their heads or wave or anything. Instead, they walked straight toward me. Their boots crunched on the gravel, and they moved like they had a plan. Karen stopped in her tracks, confused. I could see her out of the corner of my eye, standing there with her mouth open a little. I turned off my mower with a quick flip of the switch, and it went silent. The yard was quiet now, except for the sound of the officer's footsteps. I wiped my hands on my shorts and looked up at them, wondering what was going on. Karen wasn't wondering. She was sure. She thought she knew everything. She was practically dancing with excitement, thinking, Jake's in big trouble now. She folded her arms and smirked, waiting for the cops to yell at me or maybe even arrest me for mowing my lawn. She'd been waiting for this moment, her chance to say, I was right, and you were wrong. She thought she'd won the fight. But she hadn't won anything. Not yet. Because those officers? They weren't here for her silly complaint about noise. Nope. They were here for something totally different. Something I'd been keeping secret. Something Karen didn't know about and wouldn't guess in a million years. The tall officer stopped a few feet away from me. He had a serious look, like he meant business. The shorter one stood next to him, hands on his belt. I could feel my heart beating a little faster. Not because I was scared, but because I knew this was about to get interesting. Karen was still standing there, watching, thinking she'd called the cops and they'd come running to help her. But she didn't call these cops. That's the part she didn't understand. I leaned on my mower, trying to look calm. The grass smelled fresh, and a little breeze blew through the yard. The officers were close now, and I could see Karen trying to listen in. She took a step closer, her eyes big and curious. She thought this was her big win. She thought they were going to say, Jake, stop that mower right now, or you're breaking the rules. But they didn't say anything like that. Not even close. Here's what Karen didn't know, I wasn't just some guy with a lawnmower. I had a secret, a big one. I'd been keeping it quiet for a long time, not telling anyone in the neighborhood. Not Mr. Thompson with his flowers, not the family down the street, and definitely not Karen. She thought she knew me. She thought I was just a regular guy she could boss around. But she was wrong, and she was about to find out how wrong she was. The cops didn't care about my mower. They didn't care about Karen's phone call. They were here for me, but not because I was in trouble. They had something else on their minds, something important. And Karen? She was just standing there, clueless, thinking she'd saved the day. She didn't see what was coming. She didn't know this wasn't her story anymore. It was mine. I could tell the officers were ready to say something. The tall one shifted his feet, and the shorter one glanced around the yard. Karen edged closer, trying to hear. She was so excited, so sure she'd gotten me caught. But the truth was starting to peek out, little by little. Those cops weren't here because of her. They were here because of me, and not for the reason she thought. The neighborhood felt extra quiet now. No mower noise, no yelling, just the sound of a few birds chirping. Mr. Thompson was still watching from his yard, holding his watering can like he didn't want to miss anything. Karen was frozen, waiting for the big moment. She thought it was her big moment. She thought she was the hero who stopped the noisy mower guy. But this wasn't about noise. This wasn't about rules. This was about something way bigger, and I was the only one who knew it so far. I stood there, looking at the cops, waiting for them to talk. My mower sat next to me, still warm from all the work it had done. Karen's smirk was starting to fade, just a little. She could tell something was off, but she didn't know what. She didn't know the cops weren't her friends right now. They were mine. And that was the first little hint that things were about to change. So, there I was, in the middle of my yard, with two officers walking up to me and Karen watching like a hawk. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd called the cops and saved the neighborhood from my mower. But those cops? They weren't here for that. They were here for something else, something I'd been hiding. And bit by bit, the truth was starting to come out. Karen didn't see it yet, but she would soon. This was just the start, and it was about to get a whole lot crazier. Stick with me, because you won't believe what happens next. The taller officer stopped just a few steps away from me. He was a big guy with a serious face, like he didn't smile much. He looked right at me and said, "Jake Miller." His voice was deep and calm. I nodded my head, feeling the sun on my back. Karen was standing close by, watching everything. She had this big smirk on her face, like she thought she'd just caught me doing something really bad like stealing candy or breaking a window. She was so sure she'd won, and she couldn't wait to see me get in trouble. Then the officer said something that changed everything. "We've been trying to reach you," he told me. "You're needed downtown, urgent assignment." His words hung in the air, loud and clear. I saw Karen's face freeze. Her smirk disappeared, and her mouth dropped open like a fish out of water. She blinked fast, like she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. "Wait, what?" "Assignment," she sputtered, her voice all shaky. She didn't get it? Not yet. I couldn't help it, I grinned a little. Just a tiny smile, because this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I reached into my pocket, nice and slow, and pulled out something shiny. It was my police badge. Yep, a real, honest-to-goodness badge, with my name and number on it. I held it up so the sun made it sparkle. "See this?" I said, looking at Karen. "I'm not just some guy with a lawnmower. I'm an undercover cop." Karen's eyes got huge, like two big marbles. Her face turned red, redder than a ripe tomato sitting in the sun. She opened her mouth to say something, but all that came out was a little squeak. I kept going, keeping my voice nice and easy. "I've been working on a big case around here," I explained. "I keep it quiet, so nobody knows. Those officers." I pointed at the two guys standing there. "They're my backup. They've been close by all morning, waiting for me to finish mowing so we could go work together." Karen just stood there, staring at me. You're a cop," she stammered, like she still couldn't believe it. Her hands dropped to her sides, and she looked like she wanted to run away and hide. I shrugged my shoulders, acting like it was no big deal. "Yeah, Karen," I said. "And my mower? It's not breaking any rules." I checked the HOA book myself. Let me tell you, that moment felt good. Really good. Karen thought she had me all figured out. She thought I was just some noisy guy she could boss around. She thought she'd called the cops and won the day. But nope, she didn't call these cops. They were already coming for me, and not because of her silly complaint. They needed me for something way more important than a loud lawnmower. The tall officer nodded at me, like he was saying, "Good job keeping it cool." The shorter one, the guy with the little smile, glanced at Karen and then back at me. He didn't say anything, but I could tell he thought this was funny. Karen's big plan had fallen apart right in front of her, and she didn't know what to do. Her face was so red now, it looked like it might pop. She kept blinking, like maybe if she blinked enough, this would all go away. But it wasn't going anywhere. This was real. I put my badge back in my pocket and crossed my arms. The mower sat next to me, quiet now, with bits of grass stuck to it. The yard smelled fresh, and the sun was still shining bright. Karen took a step back, like she wasn't sure what to say next. She'd been so loud before, so sure she was right. Now, she looked small and confused, like a kid who just lost a game. Let's back up a tiny bit so you can picture it all. I'd been living in this neighborhood for months, keeping my secret safe. Nobody knew I was a cop, not Mr. Thompson, not the family down the street, and definitely not Karen. I liked it that way. I went to work, I came home, I mowed my lawn, just a regular guy, or so they thought. But I wasn't regular. I was working on a big case, something secret and important. I had to stay low-key, which means not telling anyone who I really was. That morning, my backup team, these two officers, had been parked nearby, waiting for me. We had a plan to meet up after I finished my yard work. They'd tried calling me, but I didn't hear my phone over the mower's noise. So, they drove over to get me. It was perfect timing, really. Karen thought she'd called the cops on me, but she didn't. These guys were already on their way. And now? Now she knew the truth. Karen's mouth moved, but no words came out at first. Finally, she said, but I called 911. I told them about the noise." The shorter officer turned to her, still smiling a little. "Ma'am," he said, "we didn't get that call. We're here for something else." Karen's face went from red to white, like all the color drained out. She didn't know what to say. She'd been so proud, so loud, and now she looked silly. I couldn't stop grinning. Not a big, mean grin, just a little one, because this was too good. Karen had spent all morning trying to get me in trouble. She thought she was the smart one, the one in charge. But I was the one with the badge. I was the one the cops needed. And my mower? It was just fine. I'd read the HOA rules a long time ago, and there was nothing in there about mower noise on a Saturday morning. The tall officer checked his watch. "We need to go soon, Jake," he said. "Big stuff happening downtown." I nodded. "Got it? Just let me put this away." I patted the mower like it was my buddy. Karen watched, still stuck in place. She didn't yell. She didn't point her finger. She just stood there, quiet for once. This was the big moment, the part where everything flipped. Karen thought she'd caught me, but I'd caught her by surprise instead. She didn't know who I was until right then, and it hit her hard. The cops weren't her backup, they were mine. And that smirk she'd had. Gone. Wiped clean off her face. The two officers started laughing a little as they looked at Karen. She just stood there, not saying a word for the first time ever, I think. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. The shorter officer, the one with the friendly smile, turned to her and said, "Ma'am, next time, maybe don't call 911 about a lawnmower. It's not a real emergency." His voice was nice but firm, like a teacher telling you to sit down. Karen's face went all funny. She opened her mouth again, like she wanted to argue, but nothing happened. No words. Nothing. I could see in her eyes she wanted to run away and hide behind her perfect bushes. The tall officer gave me a nod, and then they both turned to walk back to their police car. I watched them go, feeling pretty good. Karen was still standing there, frozen like a statue. I decided to have a little fun, not to be mean, but just to finish what I started. So, I pulled the cord on my mower, and it roared back to life with a big vroom. I pushed it across the yard, cutting the last bits of grass I hadn't gotten to yet. The noise filled the air again, and Karen? She didn't say a thing. She just turned around, slow and quiet, and slinked back to her house. Her phone was still in her hand, clutched tight like it was her only friend left. As I mowed, I could see the neighbors peeking out. Mr. Thompson was by his fence, holding his watering can and smiling a little. The kid on the bike rode by super slow, staring at me and the police car. A lady down the street opened her curtains just enough to watch. They were all whispering to each other, pointing at me and then at Karen's house. Word was spreading fast. By the time the sun went down that day, everyone in the neighborhood knew the truth. The guy Karen tried to get in trouble was actually a cop keeping the streets safe. Me. And Karen? She was the one who looked silly now. I finished mowing and rolled the mower back to my garage. The yard looked great, nice and neat, just how I like it. The police car drove off, and the street got quiet again. Karen's house was dark, like she'd turned off all the lights to hide. I bet she was sitting inside, thinking about what happened. She'd been so loud, so bossy, so sure she was right. But now she knew she'd messed with the wrong guy. And the best part? She didn't dare complain about my yard after that. Not once. It felt like justice, you know? Karen always acted like she was the boss of everyone, but that day, she learned she wasn't. I didn't have to yell or fight, I just showed her the truth, and that was enough. The neighbors stopped being scared of her complaints. They started smiling at me instead, like I was the hero of the story. And maybe I was, just for a little while. Karen stayed quiet from then on, and my lawn stayed perfect. That's how it ended, with me winning, and Karen finally learning to leave me alone. So, that's the story, a Saturday that began with me mowing my lawn and ended with Karen learning something she'll never forget. It started out so simple, just a guy and his mower, but it turned into something big. Karen thought she could boss me around, like she always did with everyone. She thought I was just a regular guy she could push. But she was wrong. Sometimes, the person you think is small or weak turns out to be the one with all the power. And the ones who act like they're the boss, they might not see everything that's really going on. That's what happened here. Karen didn't know who I was. She didn't see the whole picture. But when the truth came out, it changed everything. It made me think life can be funny like that. You never know who someone really is until the big moment comes. And when it does, it can surprise you. I bet Karen won't mess with me again, and that feels pretty great. What about you? Have you ever had a time when someone thought you couldn't do something, but then you showed them they were wrong? Maybe you surprised them big time. Tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up and stick around. I've got more fun tales to share, and I'd love for you to hear them. Life's full of surprises, and sometimes, the quiet ones like me are the ones who win in the end. See you next time. Keep being awesome.